What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. It's double game week time, so we have to talk about captaincy. Who is the best option this week? Should we be looking at double game week players? Should we be looking at single game week players? There's lots to talk about, so we're going to jump into it in just a second. Please do give it a like if you enjoy it. Hit subscribe if you're new around here. Let's talk about the first team. So let's start off with Leeds, because I think this is probably where most people are going to put their captaincy. On paper, looks like the best fixtures, right? Wolves are a bit of an odd team that they're playing first of all, because I feel like we've hardly talked about them this season. Obviously, once Jimenez got injured, we weren't really looking at them from an attacking point of view, apart from a few people had Neto and Podence for a short space of time, but they've not really been prime players in our teams for most of the season. And the same with the defence as well, with Saiss obviously and Kilman not really being options for a huge amount of the season. They were for a little bit. Now, their defensive numbers are worse than last year. Like, if you go back and look at last year's underlying numbers, so things like expected goals conceded, the Wolves were one of the best teams. This season, it's 1.23 on average per game over the season. That has got slightly better over the last 6 and the last 4. And looking at their fixtures, they've played Southampton, Leicester, Arsenal, Palace, Chelsea, West Brom over those last 6. So West Brom, fair enough, you'd say not an easy team an easy team to defend against. Same with Palace, but they've played Leicester, Arsenal, and Chelsea in that run as well. So they've done okay. Still not like an elite defence like Chelsea or Man City, but not a bad one at all. And in terms of shots in the box conceded, they don't concede that many. Obviously, I think sometimes we get too kind of stuck on looking at defensive numbers and ignoring attacking ones. I already spoke about in my best double game week players video this week how good Leeds attacking numbers are, right, in terms of expected goals per game. So I won't worry too much, but Wolves is probably the more difficult of the two games. Then you look at Southampton, their numbers are a little bit skewed by the Man United game, but the fact that they get worse in the last 6 on average versus the last 4 when they played Man United, and then you add in the games against Arsenal and Leicester, it just shows that they can be gotten at, and Leeds are a team that are not going to let up at any point, and I do feel like they can get through that Southampton defence fairly easily, I would say. I definitely see a couple of goals in that game. So on paper, this looks like probably the best double game week for me this week. I mean, there's only 2 to choose from, obviously, Southampton and Leeds, so it's not that much of a difficult competition. But this is where I would be having placing my captaincy this week. In terms of options, I've put Harrison on there. Most people are probably looking for Bamford or Rafinha, right? I'm sure there's some people considering Dallas. My main issue with Dallas is you just can't trust Leeds for clean sheets. And even though these two teams, Wolves and Southampton, have not been prolific in front of goals so far this season, you've got Ings in there. You've got a pretty good attack for Wolves, albeit they are probably missing a focal point up front. Obviously, they've got Fabio Silva, William Jose, but they're new players to the team. Obviously, Fabio Silva's barely even played a professional game before he came to Wolves as well. So I don't know if they're going to provide that much opposition, but the problem is Leeds always give up chances. Calvin Phillips is definitely out of the first game against Wolves as well, which doesn't really help from an attacking or a defensive point of view. Hopefully he'll be back for the Southampton one. But yeah, looking at the options, so for me, Dallas is just not an option, because I love the guy because he's always got a chance of getting you an attacking return, especially when he plays in midfield, but you're never ever confident about that clean sheet. And it's just different to Lundstrom last season, where Sheffield United were definitely getting a lot of clean sheets, and then also he had attacking returns on top playing in midfield. So Dallas not an option. I also think, looking at this, I wouldn't go for Harrison. I just think Harrison is the worst option out of these 3. I've seen some talk of people going triple Leeds attack instead of having one defender. That's absolutely fine. But in terms of captaincy, looking at the numbers, I just wouldn't go for Harrison. So then it comes down to Bamford versus Rafinha. Now, if you look at their numbers for the whole season, like their expected goal involvement per 90, Bamford is higher, right? It's something like 0.63. Rafinha comes in just below 0.5, I think. And most of that is because Bamford's goal threat is just a lot higher. This isn't even taking into account the fact that he has penalties. His goal threat is just higher, and therefore I feel like he is the better option out of the 2. Rafinha does have a bit more assist potential, but I don't feel like it adds up enough to beat Bamford. Now, there are other factors to take into account, right? Midfielders find it a bit easier to get big scores, right? We saw Gundogan with 2 goals and an assist, huge score, 19 points in just 60 odd minutes, even if Bamford got a hat-trick, he wouldn't get to 19 points, right? He'd only have 17. So it is easier for midfielders to rack up scores because we know they get the point for a clean sheet. Then again, I'm not expecting too many clean sheets in these two fixtures, and they get the extra point for a goal. So when you take out bonus and stuff, Rafinha might have a slightly higher chance. And I think since he's come into the league, points-wise, he's pretty much matched Bamford anyway. So I do think he's a good option. And the other thing to consider is his ownership is much lower. Now, I do try and not make decisions based on ownership. But if you are genuinely stuck, I would probably go for the lesser owned. I said that about Gundogan and Sterling last week. Didn't go quite right. I think the difference in points between those two was a bit crazy, to be honest. It's probably going to be a bit closer between these two. And Rafinha is much lower owned. His ownership will obviously go up this week quite high, but I don't think it's going to get anywhere near Bamford's. Like, Bamford will be over 100% effective ownership by a long way. Therefore, if you don't captain him, he does really well. You'll get red arrow after red arrow after red arrow, even if you've got him in your team. But I do think it's close. My preference is Bamford. I think I would just back the penalties. I know Rafinha's got set pieces, but that's not enough to make him a better option over Bamford for me. But on his day, Rafinha, let's say there's no penalties. Obviously, being a midfielder, he does have the chance to rack up that bigger score. And he has consistently put in great performances since he's played. And you can even see that in the stats, right? Even though Bamford's had more shots in the box over the last 4, their expected goal involvement's pretty much identical. But for me, I would always swing it with the penalties, and therefore I think Bamford is the best option, but I don't think Rafinha is a bad option either. So let's look at Southampton, right? On the one hand, they get to play Leeds, which we'll get onto the numbers in a sec. A pretty poor defence, though, and I would say having Leeds as one of your fixtures is much better than having Wolves or Southampton for the other one. But it's coupled with Chelsea, who are one of the worst teams that I would want to play right now, or even throughout the whole season. And the one thing that Chelsea have done is they have carried their really good defensive numbers from last year through to this year, right? They were one of the top defences last year. They still are. Obviously, Man City are operating at an elite level, but Chelsea are not that far behind, honestly. 0.87 expected goals for the season, 0.65 and 0.5 over the last 6 and 4. And the matches they've played, Newcastle United, Sheffield United, Spurs, Burnley, Wolves and Leicester. So not necessarily the most difficult games. Obviously, Tuchel's had quite a nice start to his Chelsea career. But even if you look at the whole season when they've played all these big clubs, they're still a great defence. So I think Southampton are going to struggle in this one. It is at home, so perhaps that gives them a little bit of an advantage. But they haven't been scoring a lot of goals this season. And Danny Ings, I've spoken a few times this week, his own personal numbers are down quite a lot. When I say numbers, I'm talking about underlying statistics, his expected goals per 90, expected assists and stuff like that. So I think that Chelsea game is a bit of a worry. But then you come on to the Leeds game, and they're a really poor defence. So even though they've slightly improved over the last 6 and last 4, where they've played Arsenal, Palace, Everton, Leicester, Newcastle, Brighton, so not probably the most difficult games in terms of a defensive point of view, they're still giving away so many chances. Over the season, it's 1.7. Even over the last 4, it's 1.54. So Southampton will get chances in those games. Like Leeds, just very rarely do they fully control a match from 0 to 90 minutes, right? Even against Newcastle, they're doing really well. They still let Newcastle in for a time. And I definitely think that's something that will happen at Southampton. For me, the only player you should be considering for Southampton is Danny Ings. I do not see Southampton getting a clean sheet. I actually think Leeds have got more chance of a clean sheet this week than Southampton do. So Vestergaard, whoever it might be, just not an option. And in midfield, there's just too much to kind of concern yourself with possible rotation. So Redmond's been playing up front. He's an out of position option potentially, but could Che Adams play one of these games or even both of them? Where will Minamino play? Will he play both? I just wouldn't be looking there. I just think that's just on like proper Puntsville, right? If you're the kind of player that wants to do that, absolutely. But I'm talking about the best captain, so it has to be Danny Ings. And it's just not been that good. He's just not been that good this season. He's had some injuries. Maybe that's affected his rhythm. But last 4 matches where he's played a good amount of minutes, yes, one of them was against Man United. You can probably write that one off. But 6 shots in the box, 5 chances created, 1.68 expected goal involvement. Like I said, his XG per 90 minutes, XG per 90 numbers are down last year. So if you go and look on FBref, I don't know if it's FBref or FBref. I'm assuming it's FBref. I think he's down to like 0.27 expected goals per 90 versus like 0.49 last year. That's quite a big drop off, right? And when you've got to play Chelsea as one of those games, like for me, if I buy Ings, and I might do it, I feel like, right, I'm hoping for something against Leeds, and if I get anything against Chelsea, that's just a bonus. I wouldn't be expecting too many points. So I like him as a captain option. I would still captain him ahead of pretty much any other single game week player this week. But ahead of Leeds players, I just think Leeds are better options this week. Nothing wrong with Ings at all if he's the only one you've got. But if you've got Bamford or Rafinha, I think it's difficult to make a case against them and to captain Ings instead. But he does have a double, better than all the single game weekers. That Leeds game could be very lucrative. Not a bad option at all. So we're going to talk about Manchester United versus Newcastle United, because I know people will want me to talk about that. They'll be thinking about captaining Bruno Fernandes, especially after his performance in the Europa League last night as well. And obviously I know people captain him against West Brom as well. For me, I just don't like captaining single game week players. So I'll say that straight away. Even though I'm going to try and talk about this unbiasedly, right, and with the numbers in front of me, I probably do have some subconscious bias that just doesn't let me like single game week players. And to give you an example, right, I know Man United played poor against West Brom and he came out with 9 points. But even then, Sterling, who got 1 assist in the first game, had a rubbish second game, got a yellow card, he still got 7 points, right? Yes, that's less. I fully get that. If you're looking at kind of outcomes to determine your decisions, then yeah, you wouldn't do it. Again, you wouldn't captain someone like Sterling. But what I'm trying to show is, even with a rubbish performance and a yellow card and just 1 assist, he still got close to Fernandes' numbers, right? It just goes to show you the power of 2 games, right? It's obvious, I know, when you say it out loud, but even Danny Ings for me is a better option than Fernandes, because you get your couple of your couple of appearance points versus Chelsea at least. You get hopefully a goal or maybe even 2 or 2 attacking returns. Let's say 2 goals, 1 goal, 1 assist, whatever it might be. And suddenly Bruno Fernandes has got to get at least 2 returns in just this one game, which he could do, right? But that's just to match it. And we saw what Gundogan did. And again, Gundogan probably overperformed a little bit, but he didn't even play the second game. Imagine if he had, right? Imagine if he'd only got 1 goal, 1 assist in the first game and then played the second one, right? He would have smashed Fernandes' score. So again, if we're looking at single game week options, I think he probably is one of the best, if not the best. But I just prefer the double game week option. So I'll say that straight away. I've spent a couple of minutes talking about that. Looking at the numbers, Newcastle are a poor defence. Yes, there's some improvement over the last 6, last 4. But when you look at the teams they face, Southampton, Palace and Everton as part of that, I think Man United could probably do a job on Newcastle. As long as they don't have such a bad performance like they did against West Brom, that might give Steve Bruce some shred of hope that he can do well in this. But without Callum Wilson, that's not probably going to help. So it's all down to like St Maximin and players like that. So 1.47 expected goals conceded over the whole season per game average, and then that's come slightly down. But there's still a weak defence. Again, you look at Man United's numbers, I don't think many people are going to be captaining Rashford. I think if you own Rashford, you're probably just happy about that, not to captain. And Cavani, we're going to have to wait and see if he's fit when Ollie does his press conference. This will probably go out before I see that news. So Bruno Fernandes is the one. His shots in the box are still quite low. Like he's basically scored a couple of worldies recently, hasn't he? The Everton shot from outside the box where he chipped the keeper, the volley in the box as well, which is, look, don't get me wrong, it's a great strike, and I am not like putting him down at all because he's been so consistent. 41 fantasy returns in 38 games since he joined Man United. That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's still not quite as high as Mo Salah's average points per match when he got his 303 season, but it's right up there in terms of best FPL assets ever. So I would not write him off. Can he outscore Bamford, Rafinha, Ings? He absolutely can, but I just wouldn't take the risk with just 1 week. So for me, I wouldn't say he's a bad option, but he's just not as good as the double game week options, in my opinion. So I know what you're thinking, right? If he doesn't like Bruno Fernandes in a single game week, why would he like any of the rest? And to be honest, you're absolutely correct. I just wouldn't. But let's talk about them anyway, right? Just for consistency's sake. So Chelsea, look, there's not many players that are playing every game for Chelsea right now. Timo Werner is one of them. But I feel like content creators, including myself, you talk about Timo Werner enough, at some point he'll score, and then great, you said it enough times, it happened. I do wonder if with Tuchel in, it's just giving him that bit of confidence, right? He's playing every week, German manager, is that helping? Has he put his arm around him and said, look, you're playing really well, the goals are going to come, and they have come now, and he looked delighted with it, right? It wasn't even, it was a decent goal, he was in the right place, it wasn't like a worldie or anything like that, but he looked so happy that he'd scored. And he must be feeling the pressure, so that must be a huge relief. So potentially now, he's going to go on a bit of a run. Chelsea do have really good fixtures. So he could be a bit of a differential for people. And Southampton is a good fixture, but obviously that is a massive punt. You're going against the double game weekers for a player that just keeps missing big chances recently. But he's one to... I will keep an eye on him. I think Chelsea's fixtures coming up, we're not really talking about them because of all the doubles and the blanks and stuff. And Chelsea are going to go ignored, but he is starting every game, and Tuchel has got them playing really well. So I would keep an eye on him. Maybe not for captaincy, but for an option in. Liverpool versus Everton. So again, Everton just conceding goals left, right and centre at the moment. I don't think their defence is particularly good. I think this is one of those games that's difficult to call because it's a derby, but there are no fans in the stadiums, right? So it's not quite the same. And I think the likes of Salah and Mane will have good opportunities in here to get a big score. But again, obviously I wouldn't back against them. But if you're looking at single game week captaincies, I don't see Salah as much of a worse pick than Bruno Fernandes this week, to be completely honest. So Mane or Salah could be options. And elsewhere, just not liking it at all. Villa versus Leicester, there could be goals in it, potentially. I think West Ham versus Spurs will be tight. I own Son. I'm not sure how much I would break my team apart to want to own Son and Kane this week, so that would be a bit of a worry. And obviously Man City could do decent things against Arsenal, but when there's a double game week to go on, you're just not looking at single game weekers. So ignore Man City for this week. They've got doubles coming, right? Just use them for those weeks instead. So that's the other matches. Let me know in the comments below who your best captain is this week. There we go. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. I'll try and get this up as soon as possible before the deadline to hopefully help you make your decisions. If you have enjoyed it, do give it a like and hit subscribe if you're new around here. I'll be back later for hopefully one more video, which will be the deadline stream an hour before tonight's deadline. If the fixtures get announced, I'll try and put a video up, but I'm just not sure how much time there is going to be between what I'm recording right now and the deadline stream, so we'll have to wait and see. But fingers crossed we get the fixtures confirmed today, but who knows, right? We'll have to wait and see about that. And if you want to sign up to Patreon, there is a link in the description below if you want to support me and the channel a little bit further. Thank you to all the legends that are already up on the wall supporting. There's over 250 of you now, so thank you very much. I think there's over 250 anyway. And Rahul W, thank you for signing up, latest Patreon member. So if you want to check that out, link in the description below. I'll leave it there. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you later for the deadline stream.